Summer, Chapter 56. A lot of things happened that summer. In June, new school board members were appointed and they voted to rehire the purged teachers. Daddy received his teaching contract for the next year on June 18th. He signed it and returned it to the post office the very same day. David changed his major yet again. He was studying politics this time and went to live with a friend in Washington, D.C. for the summer. Mother gave Betty Jean a raise, and Judy came home. I expected it to be awkward, like our visit at Christmas, or tense, like over spring break when I had to watch every word. But it wasn't. It was comfortable, like reuniting with an old friend. After dinner, I went into her room to watch and unpack. And tomorrow, said Judy, maybe we can go to the zoo and then the pool. Actually, I said, what? I already have plans. Oh, I couldn't read her face. Was she disappointed or surprised or something else? I'm going to the movies with Nora. We're going to see the South Pacific downtown, and out for ice cream afterward. Oh, Nora, huh? You can come too if you want. Nah, I really wanted to catch up with Margaret. To my surprise, Judy was smiling. I was trying to be nice to you, but it sounds like you don't need me to arrange your social life anymore. No, I said. I guess I don't. You don't sound too happy about that, said Judy. It's a good thing, Marley. I know, it's just... And then I told her about Liz and our final phone call. Oh, Judy said when I was done. Well, last time she disappeared, you sent her a note, didn't you? Yes, I said. Well, said Judy, maybe you should try it again. So I wrote Liz a note. It was really more of a letter this time. I told her about how little Jimmy and I had had our Coke by the pool, how we'd eaten a burger at Crystal and gone skating at Troy's on a rainy afternoon. I told her that Nora, it turned out, liked cards and was almost as good at hearts as I was. I told her how JT and Sally were going steady and how it seemed to make them nicer to everyone, at least most of the time. Most of all, though, I told Liz about how I went to the zoo every Tuesday afternoon by myself and thought about her and the past year. I told her about how Red was gone and that I still had the book of magic squares. Every time I added up a row, column, or diagonal, I thought of her. I promised to be at the zoo every Tuesday afternoon that summer, just in case she ever wanted to join me by the lions. I was just getting ready to seal the letter and run it over to Pastor George to give to Liz at youth group, just like I had done before, when I thought of something else. I looked through my purse and found the tattered black feather. I tucked it inside and licked the envelope shut. I waited week after week by the lines, but she never showed up. The high schools were scheduled to open early that year, on August 12, 1959, before the pools even closed. The elementary schools and the junior highs wouldn't open until a day after Labor Day, like always. When August 12th finally came, Daddy and I got up with Mother and Judy in a reverse of the day last fall when Daddy and I had gone to school and they hadn't. We all got into the car and drove Mother to Howell High School and dropped off Judy at Central. On the way home, one of the streets was blocked off. Daddy parked the car and we got out to see what was going on. There were more than 200 people in the street, some in cars, some on foot. In the front walked a man holding a Confederate flag. Others still held signs reading, Arkansas is for Fabus. What did that say? For Fabus and race mixing is communism. What's going on? I asked. They're protesting, said Daddy in a monotone. We're marching to Central. A man called out. Stopped them last year. We will again. No, Daddy muttered. Not again. So basically they want to close the schools down again. A car was playing Dixie way too loud. This is how it started in 1957, whispered Daddy. Protests had turned into mobs and the police did nothing. Daddy and I turned and saw police and firemen up ahead. They'd set up a small barrier. Daddy shook his head. They're going to let the protesters pass, just like they did 2 years ago. But I thought I saw something different on their faces. A determination to make Little Rock a different place than it was before. One of the officers held up a megaphone. Stop! You are not allowed to get any closer to the high school. The protesters just kept marching on. I'm not sure who was more surprised, Daddy or the protesters. When the firemen turned on the hoses, in an instant the segregationists were soaked. Most of the protesters were left immediately, wet and soggy as they made their way home. But a few became enraged and started throwing rocks, bottles, and the very signs in their hands. But before we could run back to safety for our car, the police moved in and began arresting people. Daddy and I stood and watched, frozen. It's not going to happen again. And when he grabbed my hand, I thought he was going to cry. In a few minutes, over 20 people were arrested, and the street was empty again. They They'd been stopped just a block from Central High School. Daddy looked at me. Have no fear of them. I quoted Peter at him. Nor be troubled. He gave me a hug. That's my brave girl. At dinner, when we asked Judy how school had gone that day, she said, fine. There weren't even any protests this time. Daddy and I glanced at each other, but we didn't say a word. In the end, there were only 3 colored students at Hall. Effie Jones, Elsie Robinson, and Estella Thompson. And only 2 at Central, Carlotta Walls and Jefferson Thomas. There were no colored students at the junior highs or elementary schools. Only 5 students, said Mother, shaking her head. We still had a long, long way to go. The High Dive, Part 2. The next Tuesday, like always, I spent wandering around the zoo. I visited the gorillas, Ruth the elephant, the zebras, the flamingos, and finally, when I was tired of walking, I stopped with the lions. There on our bench sat a tall girl with black hair and skin the same color as mine. She was clutching an old black feather in her hands. Hi, I breathed. Nothing else would come out. I'm sorry I couldn't come sooner, Liz said. It took me this long to convince my mother to let me. I shook my head. It doesn't matter. She was here now. I showed my notebook. I wanted her to know about the turtles and the crawdads and the quiet lessons. After my mother read it, she said I could come to see you one last time. I didn't know what to say. She's actually just over there, waiting by the monkeys, said Liz. I glanced up and caught a glimpse of Mrs. Fullerton. She was watching us, and if she wasn't smiling, she wasn't frowning either. I thought of how scared she must have been this past year, and suddenly I no longer blamed her for keeping us apart. I waved, and after a moment, she nodded in return. So, said Liz, the school's reopened. Yes, integrated. Even if it's just a token number of Negroes, it's integrated, I finished. Yeah, said Liz. There was a long pause. Finally, I sat down on the bench next to her. How's Curtis? I asked. Fine, Liz said and blushed, which told me everything I wanted to know. How's little Jimmy? I like him a lot, I said. I think just as a friend. Anyway, you were right. I did need other friends, even if they aren't friends as good as you. Are we still friends? Asked Liz. Of course, I said. We'll always be friends. Even if we don't ever get to see each other, said Liz. I've thought about it a lot, I said. I think a friend is someone who helps you change for the better. And whether you see them once a day or once a year, if it's a true friend, it doesn't matter. You're pretty good at saying what you think now. I learned from the best. Liz smiled. Remember when we saw The Wizard of Oz at the Gem? Of course I remember, I said. It was the first movie we saw together. It was the only movie we ever saw together, Liz said. There'll be others. Someday, said Liz. Things will be different. I agreed. Somewhere, said Liz. Over the rainbow. She stood up. Until then, call me. And then she was gone. On the seat where she'd been sitting was another 3x3 magic square. The first 2 and the last 2 digits were the year 1959. And the other 5 numbers, well, they were her new phone number. As soon as I got to the pool that afternoon, I knew what I had to do. I didn't say a word to anyone, just put my towel down next to Judy and waved to little Jimmy and walked over to the 5-meter platform, dived, and started to climb. It was a beautiful, clear day, and when I got to the top, the wind danced the ends of my hair. They tickled my neck. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked down. It still made me dizzy. Everything was the same, and yet not the same. I looked up. A plane flew overhead, and my eyes cleared. I imagined Liz and Curtis and Betty Jean at the pool, swimming with Nora and little Jimmy and Mother and me, somewhere over the rainbow. And so I jumped. I wish I could say it was a perfect swan dive. Actually, it was more like a crazed belly flop, and all the air was sucked out of me as I hit the water at a funny angle. I floundered under the water, my skin stinging all over. Sure, I was drowning. Then I opened my eyes. The water was blue and full of chlorine, and my eyes stung. But I factored the equation and realized I was upside down, and all I had to do was wrap myself and swim up. Sounds easier than it was, but I clawed my way to the surface. And when I took that first deep breath and saw the clear summer sky and heard my sister Limit, little Jimmy, and Nori, and even Sally and JT cheering for me, I swear I heard the lions roar.